Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Camera Tuesday, we're going to talk about Nikon Z 28 to 400 f4 to f8 VR lens. So let's dive deep into it. So this puppy is a super zoom. So what does that mean? That simply means this is a one lens to do them all, and it goes from wide to really telephoto. Like wide is not that super wide, but tele is like damn. Tele is like damn tele. And as of now, when I'm making this video, as of now, most likely this is the world's first full frame, as in 35mm 14x lens. Because you have to understand, we can make lenses that are like, x wise, as in like you take the big number divided by the smaller number, that will give you the x factor. Heck, even my first point and shoot camera had 10x lens. It was quite easy to have very high x, like in a camcorder. Basically, small sensor equals you can have as much x as you want. Even on APS-C sensor, achieving just 10x is very difficult. However, right now there are a lot of 10x formulas for lens from multiple brands for Sony and Canon and even Nikon. But having 14x, damn, that gives you that extra bit of reach. In this scenario, the extra bit goes into the tele end rather than the wide end, and depending on your use case, you may be like, dude, I would have loved if they dumped that 4x and the back end, as in made it more wider. Other people may be like, what if it was just a bit more tele? So it is what it is. So at wide angle is 28, which many of you may be like, yeah, just 4 more millimeter would have been like, standard size, but this is good enough. Now in tele, this is good. It's 400mm, because be mindful, 70 to 200 is very common. 70 to 300 is very common. 400 is not that common. So having a optical lens that goes to 400, that's like, damn. But it does have a penalty. It does have variable aperture, and it's almost assume it as f8 lens rather than f4 lens, because it drops down very quickly. Now all of that is one thing, unless the price is known. The price is 1,25,000, and I'm basically site of Nikon, and in Indian websites I'm easily getting 1,20,000, or if you want dollar prices, that's like around $1,300. You should be able to get it for a bit cheaper. So this is the price of it. For a first party lens, a super zoom lens, reasonable price. Now let's put things into context. So what are the specifications of this puppy? Well, it's not that heavy. It's only 725 gram. Now, is that good or bad? Here's the deal. For super zoom, it's okay. It's not the greatest, it's not the worst. It's okay. Now, be mindful, it does sacrifice. Any optical engineer can design a perfect lens. Question is what you have to sacrifice to meet that price point, the weight requirement. So the aperture is the priority. So what does that mean for you? Well, it simply means if you have a camera whose ISO performance is not satisfactory, do not look into this lens. If you are happy with your lenses as basically camera, and you take a photo, let's say, and it's very underexposed, and you're like, okay, no problem, I'm gonna just increase in the Lightroom, and the noise that comes out when you do that is basically, you have to understand, there is actually only one circuit. So analog to digital camera sensor, analog to digital camera digital file. And ISO does not mean anything. It's just a digital gain. Basically, you are okay, digital gain. If you have a modern camera made after, let's say, 2015, you will hear this term dual ISO. Here's the deal. You have so many ISO number, then what does dual mean? Dual simply means there are two physical circuit. So you have sensor, analog to digital converter, analog to digital converter B. So one is made for daytime shooting, one is made for nighttime shooting. That basically they fine tune it such a way that it's very optimum for their use case. So the gray value is very precisely toned for the requirement. So what happens, all the ISO in between is just a digital gain. Either you are increasing the gain on the lower one, generally you only increase the gain. So lower one, it trips, ISO second is activated, lower one, gain. So whenever you are changing the exposure in Lightroom, or changing ISO that is not in that number, like actual hardware number, and you are happy with it, that means you are happy with the noise profile of your image sensor. If you are happy with that, then this lens will serve you well. If you are not happy with it and you are really frustrated with it, do not look into this lens, do not touch into this lens. So be mindful, because the aperture shrinks very rapidly. You'll think like, f4, how much does it go? Yeah, f4, which is actually useful, it goes to f4.5 at 35mm. Yeah, you're losing it quickly. 50mm, you have already dropped to 5.6. Yeah, now you're reaching kit lens. 105, 6.3. Yeah, that's becoming a tight. 200, f8. So 200 to 400, it's a f8 lens. That is, f8 is like a kind of tight. even for telephoto. So be very mindful. That's why I said, like, you must be happy with your camera's ISO noise platform. If you're not happy with that, do not look into this lens, because you have to increase it up, you have to boost it up, and you will be frustrated. But if you're happy with it, or you do not care, or like your medium of delivery, let's say how you deliver your puppies, and most people do not care about that. Let's say you're uploading everything into Instagram, which is squish it to 12 megapixel. Who cares? Go ahead with this. But if you are one of those guys, like, really want to be perfect and all that, this is not for you. And be mindful, we may want everything, but here's the deal. Can there be a lens that can give you everything? Absolutely. It's called this lenses. These are broadcast lenses. They come in a box, and the reason why they come in a box, they have lens with motors, with some extra motors. So when you zoom in, there is another lens that moves backwards, so it never lose your focus, so it remains parfocal. Other systems that compensate for the distortion, pin cushion and barrel distortion, it compensates for it live, and that's why it has such a large range. And only then they can give you a large enough aperture that in a cricket field you can have from one end to other end, and it will be sharp AF. Consequence, you do not talk about the size, and you definitely do not talk about the price, because this is on the Ferrari category. If you have to ask the price, you cannot afford it. So let that be very clear. Judge it accordingly. For the price, it's okay. For like, what if we had this, or like, you may be like, hey, I wanted a bit more than f8 in 200. Again, you can get it. You can still buy it. Heck, there are smaller variant of this also. But yeah, do not Google the price. It's available in Canon. Do not Google the price. These are video lenses. They're expensive. So that's there for this sort of price. Now be mindful, Sony, because again the aperture is so sharp, your exposure time has to go up. Basically, either you bump up the ISO or you increase the exposure. People would like to increase the shutter speed, as in exposure time. Instead of, let's say, 1/60th of a second, you may want to try 1/30th of a second. You can't do that if it's not stabilized. So thankfully they did not cheap out on image stabilization. It has 5.5 stops of image stabilization, which in all testing I've seen, it's actually competent. Not the latest and greatest, but competent, meaning it will actually work quite well. And in terms of close focus distance, in certain scenario, you can drop that puppy to 20 centimeters, this far. Basically, take this lens, stack one lens again, almost that, which is quite close, 7.9 inches, quite close. So as a macro, would it give you the most epic macro? No. Will it give you good enough macro to actually be useful and viable? Yeah, absolutely. Filter thread, 77 millimeter, aperture blades, 9 bladed iris, which is actually decent, so to say. Everything about this lens is optimum, decent, not like whoa, because again, you can get that whoa, but the size will become whoa. So be realistic. So what about the quality? Now let this be very clear. Do not expect this to be a holy trinity lens, even though it has ranges of that. It's not. So it is what it is. You have to be very mindful before you buy this, or before you complain about this, because here's the sharpness, the best case scenario I can describe it, okay. It's not bad, but it's okay. And what about the edge sharpness? Yeah, it's meh. Basically, there are lenses from Nikon only in this sort of price range which will have better corner sharpness compared to this lens's center sharpness. So you are compromising a lot for that super zoom range. And again, that's why companies generally do not make super zoom unless it's a broadcast and they have freedom of cost and freedom of size. So there is penalty, because be mindful, when you are making super zooms, we are used to having one type of distortion. You can have barrel distortion where things looks to bulging out, and you could have pin cushion where things are chopping in, which again, so for portraiture, many people like it, because again, if you frame it properly, you may find it reduces nose sizes little bit, but every little bit helps. So this, because it's a super zoom, it goes through all of them. Basically at the wide end, it's like barrel distortion, then it slowly turns to flat, where it's like absolutely flat, awesome. Like if you want to do panoramic photography, you will do that, so there will not be barrel distortion and computer can stitch it without any issue. And then it goes to pin cushion, which again is a penalty of super zoom lenses. So both of them are there. Now, is that an issue for you? No. 99.99% of you will never even notice it unless you go into raw settings and disable automatic corrections. So that's not an issue, but it is there. You should be aware of it. And again, this is one thing that prime lenses are still good at. No matter what you do in zoom lenses, specifically in the small ones, you can't really compensate for these things. Broadcast can compensate. You can't compensate in small sizes. So prime lenses generally, if prime lenses have distortion, that means it's a cheap lens. A properly built prime lens should always have flat field of view. So focus breathing is almost nil, which means somebody actually thought of it and thought design it in such a way that it's maybe a lens that is used as a camcorder. because again, not having focus breathing, it can be done, and again, that's the reason of that many motors and electrical wiring in the broadcast system. There is a lens that compensates for that. It has almost nil, which means as a video shooting, you can just use it, you can enjoy it, you can have fun. That is like time. That is good. That's the one part that's like, for this sort of price as a first party lens or this sort of flexibility, it's like time. That's good. However, let that be very clear. Let me repeat. If you take this same exact shot, this is from B&H, same exact shot from same sort of camera, and you just change the lens to, let's say, f2.8, yeah, it would be different, very different. And again, many times we kind of think like it's a linear relationship between f8 and f4. It's not. It's like f4, f6, f8. And then you have f8 flat. So you have to be very mindful. You drop the aperture very quickly. So in many scenarios, even those Holy Trinity lenses, even it only goes to 200. Yeah, it goes 200 at f2.8, not f8. So you will be shocked how much brighter the images can be in the same sort of scenario. So be ready of that. Now, if you know what you're doing, it's fine. If you do not, you will be disappointed. And again, broad daylight, Indian sunlight, GG. So broad daylight is the primary source. Basically, if you are using sunlight, sun is like, I got you, fam. Sun will light it up. It can suppress the ISO noise. It's like, I got you, fam. Go indoor is like, no, I do not got you. So that's the quality aspect of it. Be reasonable. For what you're buying, you're paying for it. In terms of quality, in terms of brightness, in terms of sharpness. So for whom this puppy is made? Well, there are two types of people who will enjoy the most out of it and they can get the most out of it. First is starter learner, meaning you are starting it out and you do not know, like, how do I know that you are a starter? You'll ask which lens to buy. If you ever ask that, that means you are not reached a point where you know what is your signature. Basically, a lot of people will be like, hey, I like flat images. And you're like, what does flat image means? You generally try to zoom in and try to flatten things out. Again, that's up to you. That's your signature. Go YOLO on it. Or if you're like, you know what, I want things, I want scenery, the whole things, the whole 9 yards, so to say. You're like, hey, that's a wide angle guy. So those sort of starter people, how would you know? Again, back in the old days, it was kind of easy because all of us started with point and shoot, and point and shoot had all these lens ranges, and you can just filter by in Lightroom or whatever application you were using, even in Windows, and you're like, tada, oh, most of my photos are intelligent, I will buy telephoto lens. Most of my photos are in wide angle, I'll buy a wide angle. Or you already know the use cases, like, hey, I'm gonna do this sort of work, I need this sort of lens. So, but what if you're not there? Like, you have the money, but you are not there where you know what you want. For those sort of people, this will be a good lens. Again, starter lens, not like, this is my, puppy. And for traveling, because you have to understand, people, as at a certain age, you kind of realize it's about the moments in your brain rather than moments in your camera phone. The worst experience you could have is like you went into a trip or a tour and all you did is like, and worst case, doing that with the camera. And all the photo frames and all that looks good at certain age when you're young and high horsepower. It's like after 35, it's not that interesting. You're like, bro, I'm not gonna take it's so much hassle with myself. Hassle becomes, robber of joy. So at that point in time, give me a hassle-free experience. For those sort of people who know what they are doing and they just want to travel with, hey, I'm only going to pull out this camera if it just works. I'm not going to pull out, oh, I think the prime lenses will work here. Oh, I think the telephoto will work here. No. For those sort of people, these lens will be really good match. Now, what this lens can teach you? Well, it can teach you framing. Many times you will like, once you get a zoom lens, you're like, what if I zoom in and everything? No, you need to frame it properly. And again, having a range, it allows you to inherently explore. It's like, okay, what if this? All of this framing, it becomes inherent nature because again, your lens is not limiting you, and that will allow your style to be developed and timing. Because again, photo has two moments. For example, if you have this sort of lens, which again, by all technical standard, even from Nikon's own standard, crap. Again, let's say you have a photo of a baby's first steps. Shut up, take money. Ain't nobody got time for, oh, it has ISO noise. Ain't nobody got time for that. Moment is priceless. So in those sort of scenarios where a moment and quote unquote timing matters, shut up, take money. So from that point of view, learning and framing, shut up, take money. But if you compare this camera to, let's say, Samsung S23 Ultra's telephoto lens, you may be disappointed because here's the deal. Let me be very clear. Factually, fundamentally, the images that are coming out of your camera phone is garbage. However, it's artistic garbage. What does that mean? That simply means camera just took a photo and AI painted over it. And here's the deal. What AI painted, AI has a clever trick up its sleeve. It knows what you actually want to see. Like, I do not want to see like this. I'm old. I do not want to be seen like this. I want to be like, hey, I'm young, I'm handsome. And AI is like, I got you, fam. I got you, fam. It's like, okay, what if I smoothen your skin? What if I darken this area so you are getting baldy? Like, there are so many subtle adjustment that can be done just by the AI. It's like, it's a painting that they're giving you. But again, the benefit of that is it gives you what you want. And again, ain't nobody got time. Oh, I'm gonna zoom in. People like, you can zoom it, and actually ain't nobody got time for that. People are just scrolling. Ain't nobody got time for that. It's like, oh, looks good. Thumbs up. Go ahead. Ain't nobody got time for that. So do not compare of that, because again, you have to be realistic about your expectation. If you go against the AI, you will lose, because AI will give you what you want. Again, that's why like so much hard work has to gone into a broadcast industry when we jumped from in 2008, so to say, from SD to HD. Because again, people are like, what the hell? Why the heck people look so ugly? It's like, oh, makeup has to go to HD layer. Trust me, it was like a whole debacle, so to say. So if you are coming from that sort of mobile phone experience where you used to S23 or S24 Ultra and those sort of super zoom lenses, you may be disappointed. You're like, what the hell? Why it's so noisy? And again, mobile phone is ultra noisy. It's just AI knows that it's noisy, it cleans it out. So be mindful. However, what about the cost? Because again, it's a decent chunk of change. You may get sharper and brighter lenses from Nikon only. For example, this lens, this is a bit cheaper, 1 lakh rupee. Nikon 70 to 180, f2.8, constant. This puppy will beat this. Because again, at tele end, you're like, this can go further. Absolutely true. This is sharper. This is sharper. Not only that, it's brighter, meaning at low light scenario, this allows you to actually use sharper shutter speed, so motion blur can be reduced. This is cheaper. Nikon, first party. So being very mindful. Many times you're like, okay, what if I have the all that? Is just one of the vector. If is not sharp enough, having a lower but it's sharper, you can get far better resolving power. It's not about the megapixel, it's about resolving power. And resolving power is directly tempered by the lens. And a lens that is super zoom fundamentally has generally crappy resolving power. So this lens will actually give you a better system. And again, if you are one of those guys who like, I do portraiture, that's my bread and butter. This lens will flat out in 99% of scenario will beat this puppy like there is no tomorrow. So just get into this. It's brighter, sharper, and cheaper. And again, Nikon first party, no third party lenses. And what if you're like, hey, I need that range, man. I love that reach. Again, just a little bit more money. That's one like 40,000. It's like little bit more, $1,500 in dollars terms. It's 180 to 600 millimeter, f5.6 to 6.3. Now that again, aperture does not sound as bright compared to this f2.8, but you have to understand this puppy goes to f8 the moment it crosses 200 millimeter or at 200 millimeter. Yeah, this puppy at 600 millimeter is 6.3, almost 2 stop brighter. This is far brighter in tele end when it's stopped down. When it's not stopped down, when you're like, let's say 180 it's 5.6. It's actually brighter. So for telephoto, bird photography, this lens will serve you well, and price is almost same. So be very mindful of those things. Super zoom lens is a compromised lens by design. And again, if you want to design a lens that is super zoom and non-compromising, unless you are Arnold Schwarzenegger, the likelihood of you able to carry it, and again, you have to have money like him, yeah, that chances are zero. So have your expectation reasonable. You have to be a kind of guy like who rather have a hassle-free experience than a quality experience. You're like, hey, I just want to have fun. Go YOLO with it. Hey, I just want to learn what the hell means. Like, inherently, it's like, inherently, what does it mean? Okay, buy it, have fun. But do not expect like, oh, I'm going to take photos and it's going to be awesome. It's like, there is a reason why Holy Trinity lenses are so expensive and they're so different, and why they're so like, tight, so to say. There is a reason for that. And again, even in telephoto, it's like telephoto only to telephoto. Then they can make a lens that is dedicated for it. So be reasonable. If you know your expectations, you may be better served with this puppy or this puppy. This is a very niche tool and very compromised tool. So be mindful of it. So this was my presentation of Nikon's ultra zoom lenses, which is like 14x. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike. Press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.